Berate. She was forced to marry the coldest Alpha King, not knowing he would fall for her. The wind howled across the northern plains, carrying with it the bitter scent of frost and the faint trace of smoke from distant hearths. The sun had long vanished behind clouds heavy with gray, leaving the world in a pale, frozen twilight. From the edge of these harsh lands rode Elara, a young noblewoman with chestnut hair and eyes wide with both fear and curiosity. She clutched the reins of her horse tightly, her heart pounding with every step toward the legendary fortress that loomed ahead. The castle of the Alpha King Kale rose like a jagged tooth against the horizon, its towers sharp and black, its walls wrapped in frost that glimmered even under the dim light. It was said that no living soul could soften the heart of the king who ruled here. Duration. His power was absolute, his presence commanding, and his temper as cold as the ice that crowned his towers. Yet political duty had brought Elara here, a pawn of alliance between distant houses sent to marry a man she had never met. Duration. As she approached the main gate, guards clad in dark armor watched her arrival with careful, unblinking eyes. The heavy gates creaked open as if acknowledging her presence, and a sense of finality sank into her chest. Brrr. There was no turning back. Every step she took into the courtyard seemed to echo against the stone, and she felt the weight of 1,000 whispered warnings pressing against her. Inside, the halls of the castle were vast and cold, yet strangely alive. Tapestries hung from the walls, depicting long-forgotten battles, kings crowned in glory, and dragons that once roamed the skies. The torches flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Courtiers in dark velvet robes observed her silently, their eyes measuring her every gesture. Finally, she was led to the throne room, a grand hall of ice-blue stone, where a single figure sat upon a throne carved from black obsidian. His presence was immediate, magnetic, and frightening. King Kale, the coldest Alpha, was taller than most men, his shoulders broad, his posture perfect. His hair, dark as midnight, framed a face that was both handsome and unreadable. His eyes, sharp and piercing, seemed to see through the very walls into the thoughts and fears of anyone who dared meet them.
Elara bowed, careful not to tremble.
Rise. Kale's voice was low and controlled, like the calm before a storm. His gaze did not soften as he regarded her. It merely measured, calculated, assessing every ounce of her presence. You are Elara of House Darien. You come to my lands as an envoy and a bride.
Tell me why you should not regret this journey. Elara swallowed her fear.
My king, I come as commanded by my house. I will serve and honor the union that is arranged, as is my duty.
Her voice was steady, though her hands were cold and shaking. Kale's lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile, almost imperceptible.
Duty. An admirable quality. Yet duty alone will not keep you alive here, nor will it win my favor. The hall seemed to grow colder as he spoke, the air heavy with tension. Elara felt it press against her, a reminder of the stories she had heard, stories of a man who could break even the strongest of wills. Yet, beneath her fear, curiosity stirred. She wanted to see beyond the rumors, beyond the legend of the coldest Alpha King. She wanted to know the man who ruled with frost and command, and perhaps, if courage allowed, to reach the humanity that lay buried beneath. Days passed, and the routine of the palace was a test in itself. Kale was distant and exacting, commanding respect and obedience with gestures and words that left no room for error. Every moment was measured, every action weighed, and every glance seemed to contain a silent question. Elara learned quickly that survival in these halls required more than courtesy. It required intuition, patience, and a sharp mind. Yet even in his cold demeanor, Kale's presence was compelling. At meals he spoke little, his voice a calm tide of authority, yet each word carried weight. When he passed through corridors, guards straightened, courtiers whispered, and Elara felt a thrill she could neither name nor deny. She began to notice the small details, the way his jaw tightened when displeased, the rare flicker of thought behind his eyes, and the quiet moments when he stood alone in the high windows, staring into the distance as if lost in some memory. It was during one such moment, late one night, that curiosity overcame caution. Elara had wandered the halls, drawn by the faint echo of a melody that seemed almost alive. She found herself at the base of the Forbidden Tower, a place whispered about by servants and courtiers alike. It was said that no visitor had entered and returned unchanged. The door creaked under her tentative push, revealing a spiral staircase winding upward into darkness. Heart-pounding. She ascended, each step echoing like a drumbeat of destiny. Bray. At the top, she found a small chamber, sparsely furnished, lit only by the pale glow of moonlight through tall, narrow windows. And there he was, Kale, standing at the window, silent, staring at the frozen lands below. Elara's breath caught. He did not notice her at first, lost in a quiet despair that seemed almost tangible. His usual armor of authority and fear was gone, replaced by a man shaped by sorrow, longing, and the invisible chains of his past.
I did not know anyone dared enter here, Kale said finally, his voice softer than she had ever heard it.
He did not turn to face her immediately, yet his presence filled the room entirely. I could not resist, Elara admitted, her voice trembling. I had to see what you are like when the eyes of the court are not upon you. Kyle finally turned, his expression unreadable yet softer than she had imagined possible. Curiosity can be dangerous, Elara. But perhaps it is also courageous. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind outside and the distant cries of wolves. Elara felt a strange connection forming, fragile, dangerous, and utterly compelling. She sensed the man behind the king, a man who bore the weight of his kingdom and a curse she could only guess at. And in that moment, she realized that survival would not be the only challenge in these halls. The more dangerous path would be navigating the storm of his heart. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between them grew.
Kale's test became subtle, almost imperceptible. Tasks that required Elara's intelligence and courage, challenges that pushed her limits while revealing glimpses of her own resilience.
She saw him watch her carefully, his gaze lingering longer than necessary, as if assessing not just her actions but her spirit. Elara, in turn, found herself drawn to him despite the fear he inspired. His strength, his unwavering control, his very presence. It was magnetic, impossible to ignore.
Yet, beneath the allure, there was a danger she could feel in her bones, a reminder that he was a man shaped by power, grief, and a curse that no one had ever undone.
One evening, as snow fell silently over the castle, Elara found herself once again in the Forbidden Tower. She had come to think, to breathe, to escape the endless scrutiny of the court.
Kale appeared without warning, standing by the window, his expression shadowed.
"You return," he said simply, not with reprimand but with acknowledgement.
I could not stay away, Elara admitted.
There is something about this place, about you, that I do not understand, but I want to.
Kale's eyes softened, and for a moment the icy barrier he had built around himself wavered.
You are bold, Elara. Most would not dare.
And yet in your boldness, I see something I did not expect. Curiosity, yes, but courage.
And perhaps warmth.
Elara's heart fluttered at his words. She had glimpsed it, a spark behind the frost, a hint that the coldest Alpha King was not entirely untouchable.
But, as quickly as it appeared, the spark vanished, replaced by the same unreadable, controlled gaze that had first terrified her. I will not be easy to reach, Kale said, stepping closer. Inspiration. And the closer you try to come, the greater the danger. Elara met his gaze without turning away. I understand. But I will not leave, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if echoing the unspoken promise between them. The forbidden tower seemed smaller somehow, less cold, though the frost clung stubbornly to the stone. In that quiet, suspended moment, both realized that their fates were entwined. Two souls bound by duty, curiosity, and an invisible thread that neither could resist. And yet, as Elara descended the spiral staircase back to the warmth of the castle halls, she could not shake the feeling that something unseen was watching, waiting, and moving in shadows. The legends of the castle and its king were more than stories. There was a darkness here, one that might test both her courage and her heart in ways she could never imagine. For now, all she could do was survive. But somewhere deep within, a seed of longing had taken root, an ember of connection that would not be so easily extinguished. And in the frozen halls of the northern kingdom, where frost met fire in quiet, unseen ways, the dance of fate had begun. The halls of the castle seemed quieter in the early mornings, yet the silence carried a weight heavier than any storm. Elara moved through the corridors, her footsteps careful on the polished stone. Her arrival had been weeks ago, yet every corner of the palace felt like a new test, a place where loyalty, wit, and courage were measured by unseen eyes. King Kale had remained as distant as ever during the daylight hours, commanding his court with unyielding authority. Yet in moments unobserved, Elara noticed the man beneath the king, a man burdened by loss, secrets, and the invisible chains of a curse that no one dared speak of openly. His shadow seemed to follow her, always at a distance, yet never leaving her completely. It was in the library that Elara first saw a glimpse of the man beyond the throne. The room was vast, filled with towering shelves of ancient tomes and scrolls, the air heavy with the smell of parchment and dust. Kale stood by a window, his hand resting lightly on the ledge as he read from a leather-bound book. The candlelight flickered across his features, softening the sharp edges that had so long inspired fear. Elara hesitated, unsure if she should speak. Finally, she approached. Your Majesty, she said softly, may I learn from you? Kale's eyes lifted, sharp and unreadable. Yet there was a flicker of something beneath. Curiosity, perhaps, or approval. Learn what? He asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of command. About the kingdom, she said. About the threats we face. And about you, if you will allow it. For a long moment, he studied her. Then, slowly, he gestured toward a chair. Sit, he said.
And pay attention! There are lessons that may save more than your life.
They may save your heart as well. Over the next days, Kale introduced her to the hidden truths of the castle. She learned of secret passages, of enchanted wards placed to keep intruders at bay, and of the shadows that moved at the edges of perception. She discovered that the palace was more than stone and frost. It was a living, breathing entity shaped by centuries of magic and ruled by a king whose burden was far heavier than any throne. Elara's curiosity grew, matched only by her admiration for the man who had once seemed untouchable. She noticed the care with which he treated the castle's wards, the precision of his strategy, and the quiet moments when he paused as if listening to something only he could hear. The Coldest Alpha King was not merely a ruler. He was a guardian of secrets, a protector of a fragile balance between power and peril. Yet danger was never far. Rumors of a rival noble seeking to exploit Kale's curse had begun to circulate.
Servants whispered in hushed tones of spies and traitors, moving silently through the palace, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
Bears. Alara, though still young and untested, felt the weight of these threats pressing upon her.
She could see in Kale's eyes the constant calculation, the vigilance that never wavered, and the loneliness that his role demanded.
Bray. One evening, as the wind howled against the outer walls, Alara found herself drawn to the forbidden tower once more. She had been warned to stay away, yet the pull of curiosity and the memory of the night she had glimpsed Kale's vulnerability was irresistible. The spiral staircase creaked under her careful steps, and when she reached the top, she found him there, standing as he had stood before, gazing out at the frozen landscape.
"You return," Kale said, his voice low, almost a murmur carried by the wind.
"I wanted to understand," Alara admitted, "to see what you are like when the eyes of the court are not upon you." Kale turned, his face unreadable, yet there was a softness that had not been there before. Breath.
Curiosity can be dangerous, he said, yet it can also be enlightening.
Few dare to seek what is hidden. You.
You are not like the others.
Bert, her gaze meeting his.
I want to understand, Kale.
Inspiration. I want to see the truth of who you are, not the legend or the fear. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Inspiration. Then Kale spoke, his voice almost too quiet to hear. The truth is not always kind. Inspiration. It is forged in loss, shaped by power, and protected by fear. To know it is to risk everything. Bree. Alara's heart quickened, but she did not step back. I am willing, she said softly. Bert.
I am willing to risk everything to see the truth. He studied her for a long moment, then finally nodded. Very well, he said.
Brrr. Then listened carefully. He spoke of the curse that had shaped him, a spell woven by an enemy long ago meant to harden his heart, isolate him from love, and make him untouchable. It had worked in many ways, leaving him feared, respected, but utterly alone. Inspiration. Yet he also spoke of the weight of responsibility, of the lives he had sworn to protect, and the choices he had made to maintain order in a kingdom filled with secrets and shadow. Alara listened, her heart aching for the man who had carried such burdens alone. Inspiration. And yet, she also felt a spark of hope. The man before her, despite his isolation, was capable of more than fear and control. He was capable of trust, of courage, and perhaps even love. Days later, during a rare, quiet moment in the gardens, Kale allowed her to see another side of him. Bray. The snow had melted just enough to reveal paths lined with frost-covered roses, their petals glistening like jewels in the pale sunlight.
He walked beside her, his hands behind his back, his expression thoughtful.
Inspiration.
Do you ever wonder, Alara asked cautiously, if it is possible to be free of fear, to be free of this curse?
Every day, he admitted. Yet freedom is not given. It must be earned. The cost can be higher than one can bear.
Alara looked at him, feeling a mixture of sorrow and admiration.
Then we must face it together, she said.
Inspiration. If the cost is too high for one, perhaps it can be shared.
He glanced at her, and for the first time, the frost around his heart seemed to crack just a little. Perhaps, he said softly, almost to himself.
Their growing bond did not go unnoticed. The courtiers whispered of the queen-to-be and the coldest Alpha King, their speculation filled with intrigue and unease. But within the palace walls, it was the quiet moments that mattered most. The way Kale's hand would brush hers as they passed in the hall, the rare smile that lingered when she spoke wisely, and the subtle protection he offered, always just out of sight of others. Yet danger lingered, waiting for the moment to strike. One night a shadow moved silently through the corridors, intent on delivering a warning. Or, perhaps worse, oration. Alara, ever observant, noticed the figure first. She called to Kale, her voice low but urgent. Brr. Together, they intercepted the intruder, discovering a message from the rival noble who sought to weaken Kale's claim to the throne. The note was simple but chilling. The heart of the king is vulnerable. Strike where he does not expect. The queen may not survive. Kale's expression was unreadable, yet Alara saw the flicker of anger, concern, and something she had never witnessed before, fear for her safety. This, disparate, cannot be ignored, he said, his voice steady but tight. We must act, and we must act carefully. The walls of this castle will protect many, but not all. And the enemy knows the weaknesses we least expect. Alara placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. We will face it, she said. Together. Kale's eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed himself a full smile. Not the polite, controlled smile he reserved for the court, but a real human smile, bright and fleeting. Together, he agreed. That night they worked side by side, mapping the palace, studying the castle's wards, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Alara's mind raced with strategy, courage, and the growing realization that she was no longer merely a bride in name. She was a partner, a confidant, and someone who mattered to the king in ways that were deeper than any political arrangement could define. As the candles burned low and the wind howled outside, Alara realized that her time in the palace had changed her. She had begun as a fearful noblewoman, uncertain and cautious. Now she was a woman capable of bravery, insight, and love. And in the eyes of the man she had begun to trust, she had glimpsed the possibility of a bond that could weather any storm. The night stretched into dawn, and the first snowflakes of winter began to fall. Alara and Kale stood together at the high window, looking out across the frozen lands. Somewhere in the distance, the rival noble moved, plotting, waiting for the moment to strike.
And yet, in that moment, neither Kale nor Alara felt helpless. They were ready.
The castle wall seemed colder than ever, though the hearths blazed and the corridors were filled with the murmurs of the court. Alara moved carefully among the courtiers, her eyes alert, her mind alive with questions she dared not speak aloud. Whispers of rebellion and betrayal had begun to reach her ears, and the shadow of danger loomed closer than ever before. King Kale remained as enigmatic as ever, his icy control masking the storm of emotion beneath. Yet, since the night of the Forbidden Tower, something had changed between them. Moments that had once been tense and formal now carried an undercurrent of unspoken understanding. Every glance lingered longer. Every word was weighed, not just for meaning, but for emotion. Alara had noticed the way Kale's gaze softened when she entered a room. She had seen him quietly pause, as if listening to thoughts she did not know she had voiced aloud. And yet, the barriers he had built around his heart were not gone. The court still feared him. The shadow still whispered of his curse, and the knowledge that a rival lurked somewhere in the kingdom kept them both on edge. It was during the council meeting that the first sign of real danger revealed itself. A noble from a distant province, dressed in robes of deep crimson, stepped forward and spoke with a voice both polite and threatening. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "it has come to our attention that the peace you claim to uphold may be fragile. There are forces that would see your reign undone and alliances broken." Kale's eyes narrowed,
his fingers tightening around the edge of the council table. The room grew silent as the king's presence filled the space with an almost tangible weight. Burris. "And you," Kale said, his voice like ice cutting through smoke. "Speak these words to test my patience or to warn me? Choose carefully, for the wrong answer may cost more than your tongue." The noble's lips trembled, though his composure remained outwardly intact. "I only wish to advise, Your Majesty," he said. "There are rumors of those who would exploit weaknesses even within the walls of your own castle." Elara's heart thumped. She had heard the rumors, whispered in quiet corners, rivals who sought to turn Kale's allies against him, nobles who coveted power, and magic that lingered in the shadowed corners of the palace. And now, she realized, those rumors were no longer distant. They were here. After the meeting, Kale dismissed the council. He remained standing, his back to the large windows that overlooked the frozen plains. Elara approached, her steps cautious but steady. "Kale," she said softly. "What is happening?" "Is it true? Are we in danger?" Kale turned slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a flicker of something in them, concern perhaps, or the faintest trace of vulnerability.
Yes, he admitted.
There are those who would see this kingdom fall, and not all threats are outside these walls. Some walk among us, pretending to serve.
Elara felt a shiver run through her.
The palace, which had once seemed imposing but manageable, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets and lies. And yet, she did not feel fear, at least, not entirely. The glances of resolve rising in her chest, a determination to face whatever dangers lurked, alongside the man who had begun to stir something deep within her heart. "I will stand with you," she said, her voice firm. "Whatever comes, I will not run." Kale studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Your courage is unexpected." Few dare to face what lies ahead with open eyes. "You have more strength than you realize, Elara." Days passed, and the tension in the castle grew. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, and shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. Kale continued his silent observation of Elara, testing her in small ways. Questions that probed her insight, tasks that required careful thought, and challenges that measured her resolve. She, in turn, studied him, noting the subtle cracks in his armor, the moments when his eyes betrayed emotion, and the rare instances when he let himself smile. It was during one of these quiet moments that the danger struck. Breath. A messenger arrived, breathless and pale, delivering news that a rival noble had amassed forces at the edge of the kingdom. The message was clear. Kale's rule was threatened, and the timing was precise, coinciding with a festival that drew attention from the entire court. Kale's expression remained calm, but Elara could see the tension beneath the surface. "They come not just for the throne," he said quietly, "but for me. Oh, for everything I have built and protected." Elara reached out, placing a hand lightly on his arm. The touch was fleeting, yet it carried a warmth that surprised them both. Kale's eyes softened ever so slightly, though he said nothing. The tension between them, unspoken but powerful, hung in the air like the frozen mist outside the castle walls. That night the castle was alive with preparations. Guards doubled their rounds, Courtiers whispered of strategy and magic, subtle but potent, was woven into the halls to guard against both human and supernatural threats. Prey. Alara found herself by Kale's side more than once, helping to plan, to observe, and to understand the man behind the legend. In the quiet moments when they walked the battlements together, Kale spoke of the curse that had shaped him. He told her of lost loves, of mistakes that had hardened him, and of a loneliness so deep that few could comprehend it. Elora listened, her heart aching for the man who had been called the coldest Alpha King, realizing that beneath the fearsome exterior lay a soul capable of pain and longing.
You carry burdens no one else can bear, she said softly.
And yet, you still protect others. Why? Kale's gaze lingered on her, and for a moment the walls around him seemed to tremble. Because even cursed hearts must try to do what is right, he said. Even if it costs everything. The festival arrived, and with it, the rivals' forces. The courtyards, once filled with laughter and music, were now tense with anticipation. Elora stood beside Kale as he addressed the assembled nobles and soldiers. His voice was commanding, his presence undeniable. Yet beneath the authority there was a threat of something else, a vulnerability that only she could perceive. The rival noble, clad in black and crimson, stepped forward from the crowd. King Kale, he said, his voice carrying over the tense hush. Your reign is fragile. Your alliances are weak. Even your so-called queen may not survive the coming storm. Elara's heart tightened, but she did not flinch. Kale's eyes met hers briefly, and she saw a flicker of something fierce, a determination to protect, to survive, and perhaps to finally let someone see his heart. The rival raised a hand, and a signal passed through the shadows. Death! Chaos erupted as guards clashed with intruders, the sound of steel ringing through the courtyards. Elara found herself moving quickly, guiding the palace staff to safety, while Kale led his soldiers with precision and power. The frost-covered walls seemed to echo with the sound of battle, and the night became a blur of movement and tension. At one point, Elara was cornered in a narrow hallway, trapped by an intruder's approach. She felt a hand close around hers, pulling her back into shadow. Kale stood before her, his expression unreadable, his eyes blazing. You will not be harmed, he said quietly, almost a promise. With strength and speed he moved, neutralizing the threat before it could strike. Elara's heart raced, not from fear, but from the closeness, the intensity, the undeniable bond forming between them. After the chaos subsided, they stood together in the quiet of the moonlit courtyard. Snowflakes drifted around them, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath.
Why do you care? Elara asked softly.
Why do you risk so much for me? Kale's gaze softened, and for the first time, the walls around his heart seemed to tremble. Because you are not like the others. Because you see more than the crown, more than the power. You see me. Elara's breath caught. She wanted to speak, to reach for him, but the words failed. Instead, she simply stood, letting the snow fall around them, letting the silence speak for the unspoken truths between them. The night carried a sense of fragile triumph, but neither forgot the warning signs. The rival was still out there, the curse that haunted Kale was still present, and the bond between them, though growing stronger, remained delicate, fraught with danger and uncertainty. And yet, for the first time, Elara felt something she had never imagined possible in the halls of the coldest Alpha King. Hope. The northern winds screamed across the frozen plains, whipping snow into the air like restless spirits. From the towers of the castle, King Kale and Alara watched as the approaching army grew larger, a dark ribbon against the white horizon.
Brr. The rival noble who had tried to shatter the kingdom had brought more than mere soldiers this time. He had brought skill, cunning, and magic that crept like shadow through the lands. Kale's jaw was tight, his normally controlled demeanor sharpened into something fiercer.
Yet his eyes did not leave Alara. For weeks she had fought by his side, advising, observing, and learning the strength it took to rule a kingdom threatened by war and supernatural forces.
In that time, something extraordinary had grown between them. Walls had fallen, unspoken feelings had been tested, and trust had been forged in moments of fear and courage. Brave. "You will stay behind," Kale said, his voice low, a command not meant to be disobeyed. "The battlefield is not a place for those who are not prepared for what comes." Brave. "I will not hide while you face this alone. I have learned, Kale." "I can help. I will stand with you." Inspiration. Kyle studied her, the storm in his eyes softened by an unmistakable tenderness. "And yet, I have feared losing you. Not the kingdom, not the crown, but you." The words, soft as a whisper against the howling wind, struck her heart. Inspiration. Alara stepped closer, her hand finding his. "Then let me be by your side," she said. Inspiration. Not as a pawn, not as a bride in name only, but as someone who trusts you and whom you can trust in return. Kale's gaze lingered on her, and for a brief moment the icy mask of the coldest Alpha King cracked. Inspiration. He allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod, a recognition that they were equals in courage and heart. Then, without another word, he turned to lead the soldiers toward the gates. The battlefield was a frozen expanse, broken by the march of men, the shimmer of steel, and the occasional flicker of magic. Kale's army met the rivals' forces with precision and strength, the clash echoing across the plains. Inspiration. Snow swirled into the chaos, mingling with the cries of battle and the sound of hooves pounding against frozen earth.
Alara moved beside him, her heart pounding with every step.
She had trained for moments like this, not with weapons alone, but with strategy, quick thinking, and the courage that had been tempered in the halls of the castle. Inspiration. Every glance she exchanged with Kale was a reminder that their bond was no longer just a fragile ember. It was a flame that refused to be extinguished. Amid the chaos, the rival noble appeared, his presence a dark storm upon the field. First, magic crackled at his fingertips, shadows twisting around him like living creatures. Kale's eyes narrowed, his body tensing as he stepped forward to confront the threat. "Alara," he said quietly, his voice carrying across the noise. "Stay close. Trust me, but be ready." "I am ready," she replied, gripping her weapon, her gaze steady. The rivals struck first, releasing a wave of magic that sent frost and darkness cascading toward them. Inspiration. Kale moved like a force of nature, deflecting, countering, and advancing with deadly precision. Alara's heart raced, but she moved as he had trained her, predicting movements, assisting allies, and striking when opportunity allowed. Together, they were more than king and bride. They were a force, synchronized in courage and determination. Inspiration.
At a critical moment, the rival separated from his army, targeting Alara directly. She froze for a heartbeat, and in that instant, Kale leapt forward, intercepting the attack.
His hand found hers, pulling her behind him, shielding her from danger. The contact sent a surge of warmth through both of them, an unspoken acknowledgement of trust and love forged in the fire of battle. "You are not alone," Kale said, his voice firm, almost a promise. Alara's heart swelled, and she nodded, knowing in that instant that neither of them could face the shadows alone. They fought side by side, not just for the kingdom but for each other, their connection strengthening with every move, every shared glance, every act of courage. As the rival noble attempted to retreat to a stronger position, Kale pursued, Elara following closely. They reached the edge of the northern cliffs, where the wind tore at their cloaks and the snow fell in blinding sheets. The rival turned, attempting one final strike, but Kale's skill and focus were unmatched. With precise movement, he disarmed the enemy and forced him to kneel.
"Ye sought to break what cannot be broken," Kale said, his voice low and commanding, yet carrying a hint of the emotion he rarely allowed himself to show.
You sought to destroy trust, courage, and hearts alike, but you underestimate what binds this kingdom and me to those I hold dear.
The kingdom will survive, not because of fear, but because of those who care enough to fight for it, and we will not falter. The rival's defeat was complete, but the battle had taken its toll.
Soldiers tended to the wounded, the frost-covered battlefield becoming a mixture of snow, ice, and whispered prayers for those who had fallen. Kale and Elara stood together, breathing heavily, the storm around them beginning to calm. For a long moment they said nothing, simply looking at one another. The battle had tested their courage, their trust, and their hearts, and in the quiet aftermath, they understood something deeper, something that had been growing quietly, patiently, through fear, longing, and shared trials. Kale reached out, brushing a strand of snow-covered hair from Elara's face. His hand lingered warm against her skin, and for the first time he allowed himself a full, unguarded look at her. You have changed me, he said quietly, his voice trembling just slightly.
Not just because of your courage, but because of your heart.
I thought I could never trust anyone, never love anyone, but you have proven me wrong. Elara's chest tightened, tears pricking the corners of her eyes.
And you have changed me, Kale.
You've shown me strength, honor, and a love that is not bound by fear or duty, but by choice. The wind carried their words across the plains, as if the kingdom itself had heard the promise in their voices. Slowly, deliberately, Kale stepped closer, closing the final distance between them. Their hands intertwined, their eyes locked, and for the first time they allowed themselves to feel the full weight of what had grown between them.
No words were needed as Kale leaned down and Elara met him halfway. Their foreheads touched, their hearts beating in sync, and in that quiet, snow-filled moment, the kingdom and the curse that had haunted him seemed to fade away.
They were not just king and bride, not just leader and ally. They were two souls who had fought together, bled together, and learned to trust and love together. The castle awaited them, its towers still tall and cold, but inside, warmth now pulsed with life. Courtiers, soldiers, and servants looked on with awe and respect as Kale and Elara returned, side by side.
They had survived not just the enemy at the gates, but the shadows that had lingered in the corners of their hearts. Inside the throne room, Kale addressed his court.
The kingdom is ours to protect, he said, his voice strong, commanding yet infused with the humanity he had reclaimed. But it is not strength alone that binds us. It is trust. It is courage. And it is the bonds we choose to honor, even in the face of fear. Elara stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She felt the weight of his presence, the warmth of his hand, and the certainty that they had endured not just for survival, but for love. The castle, once shadowed and cold, now felt alive, not with magic alone, but with the hope and courage of those who had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. As the sun rose over the frozen plains, glinting off the snow and ice, Kale and Elara stood together on the balcony. The kingdom stretched out before them, peaceful for now, but full of challenges yet to come. Yet in that moment, they did not feel fear. They felt readiness, resolve, and the unshakable bond of hearts that had been tested and proven unbreakable. Kale's voice, quiet but filled with certainty, broke the silence. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. Not as king and bride, not as ruler and subject, but as partners in heart and in soul.
Together, she said softly. And so, in the northern kingdom of frost and shadow, a new chapter began.
The coldest Alpha King was no longer alone. He had found trust, courage, and love in the woman who had dared to see him as he truly was. And Alara, once a pawn of alliance, had become a queen in every sense of the word, equal in strength, spirit, and heart. Though the winds still whispered across the frozen plains, and though the shadows of the past would never entirely fade, one truth remained unshakable. Together, Kale and Ilara had forged a bond that could endure any storm, face any darkness, and rise above any curse. The kingdom was safe, for now. But their story of courage, trust, and love in the face of shadow would echo through the halls of time, a legend of hearts that refused to bow to fear or destiny alone.